getting everything set up, guys. So we are here in Temple, Pennsylvania, Berks County, PA, with the Berks County Patriots this evening. They are hosting a special event tonight, self-defense and the legal system. And very excited. They have partnered up with another group this evening, and they are going to be doing the presentation. Mr. Mike G. I forget his last name. It's long. Not super long, but Mike G, because they call him Mike G. So very nice guy. Got the chance to meet him a little bit ago. And it is wonderful to see all of you guys again this evening. Now, we do know that, of course, tonight Trump is in Mount Pocono, and that's very exciting. I saw there was a huge crowd. I have some friends over there tonight. I hope they are having an amazing, amazing time. So excited. But we chose to stay here in Berks County, guys, to bring you this wonderful presentation this evening. Again, self-defense and the legal system. It's going to be really educational, and really excited to be bringing this content to you guys tonight. So are the Berks County Patriots. They're a bunch of really, really amazing folks, one of the bigger grassroots groups in Pennsylvania, always working hard to preserve our freedoms and liberties, guys. They meet the third Thursday of every month here in the Temple Fire Company Ballroom, Temple, Pennsylvania. Meetings start at 6:30. I encourage you guys to come out and check them out. Again, we have a presentation starting very, very soon. So I just wanted to say hi to everyone. And I do see Facebook comments starting to come in, so that's awesome. We are getting the comments starting to come in, guys. So very exciting. I cannot wait again for this presentation to start. It's going to be really educational tonight, something that we should all know, again, pertaining to some laws and how things work when it comes to self-defense and your home. So, again, really important for every citizen to know. This knowledge is super, super important, again, to protect yourself and your families, guys. So this is going to be, again, a really, really great presentation. It should be beginning in just a few minutes. I am going to flip the camera around for you guys and try and get that set up so that we can get it ready to go for when these speakers begin, because that should be any second now. So I'm going to flip this around and start to get you guys set up. Again, right there is the stage. As you can see, these guys are ready to go. We're going to zoom this in. Kind of zoomed in here a little bit. That should suffice. And it is wonderful to have all of you guys joining us. Thank you all for being here. Again, our presentation for the evening should be starting momentarily.
We're getting started in about 5 minutes. If you want to get your gun raffle ticket, you can do that now. Get that before we start the seminar.
All right, also, guys, I've got YouTube, I've got Kick.
Over with the rifle.
Hi, Josh. Hi, Sonal. Jerry.
Let's do that now.
Stitch. Hey, Tom. How are you, my friend?
We'll get the seminar started. Thank you.
It is wonderful, again, to see all of you guys in the comments. According to that announcement there, we are going to be starting in about 5 minutes or so. We have some of the guys here, again, going to be starting us off very, very soon. Berks County Patriots hosting this evening. And Berks County Patriots is working with U.S. Law Shield tonight, guys. They have partnered up to bring you this presentation tonight, Self-Defense and the Legal System, from Temple, Pennsylvania, Berks County. Here we have, of course, been here before a couple of times. Hello, Ed, and hello, Ed. Good to see you both. I see Rumble, and I've got Kick, and it is wonderful. Now They're the two guys, two really, really great guys. That's Sam and Jim. Looks like they're getting ready to go up there on that stage. And that's Sam up there. I'm guarding the camera. I'm the bouncer. Ain't nobody getting up here. I love it. Oh.
All right, folks, everybody's in their seats. We're going to get started. We're going to start with the introduction. We're going to do a prayer and pledge of the flag. So if everyone please rise for our prayer, please. I appreciate that. Thank you.
First of all, folks, special welcome to all of you who are here tonight. A special event that we're putting on the Berks County Patriots for U.S. Law Shield. Great that you braved the weather. A few people did, but thank you very much. Jim is going to open our meeting with a prayer and a pledge. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you, Sam. Join me in prayer, please. Gracious Heavenly Father, we do thank you and praise you for this opportunity to come together. We ask for your wisdom and guidance to prevail around this room, and we pray for our sister Sally, who lost her husband just recently. Just pray, Father, that you help her and the family to deal with the loss that they're experiencing. Help us to help Sally and her family as much as we can. And Father, thank you that Dennis is in your loving arms now. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Touch the flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Jim. Before I turn it over to Steve, I just want to make an announcement. Looks like we have a celebrity in the house. I don't want to embarrass anybody here. Scott Fry, stand up. Where are you, Scott? You folks, you can sit down. Where's Scott? Scott Fry, for those that don't know, this is his 267th 246th U.S. Shield seminar that he's been at. 246. Wow, that's fantastic. And he's going to keep that record going. Thank you very much. Okay, folks, I'm going to turn this over to Steve. I want to thank Steve very much. He's the one that did the legwork to put all this together. Thank you, Steve, and thank you for Scott, is it? Chuck. I'm sorry, Chuck, for helping putting this together. You got it, Steve.
Thanks, Sam. Again, thank you for coming out tonight, folks. We are super excited to be partnered up with U.S. Law Shield. We did a commitment to partner up with them. They got some great programs, great information. I hope what you get out of this is just because you're a gun owner doesn't mean you're okay. You need to have some type of insurance policy. To represent you in court, if you were charged with involuntary manslaughter or murder is going to be tens and tens of thousands of dollars. U.S. Law Shield provides you with a service that they will cover you and civil liability. Their attorney and Chuck, who I'll introduce shortly, will get more in depth with that. But we hope you join their company, what they have to offer, and it would help the Berks County Patriots because we are partnered with them. So every membership will help the Berks County Patriots also. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Chuck Went from U.S. Law Shield. And you don't want to go up on the podium? They do it right here.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to give a quick thank you to everybody for showing up. A special thank you to Berks County Patriots for hosting us. Kind of to give you guys a quick outline of how the night's going to go. So after I'm done here, Mike G, who's our attorney in the area, he's going to give the presentation. He's going to do about an hour speaking, and then we're going to turn it over back to us to tell you a little bit more about U.S. Law Shield and the benefits and how our program works and the benefits we can offer to you. After we do that, we're going to take about a 15-minute intermission. At that time, if you have additional questions, we'll be back at our table, and you can come back and talk to us. We'll tell you more about it one-on-one. And after that, Mike is going to come back up and finish, and then also take question and answer. I will ask that you keep your questions to the end, because it just can drag on if you raise your hand throughout the whole thing. So please keep your questions to the end, and without further ado, Mike G.
All right, thank you, Chuck, and thank you to the Berks County Patriots. How's everybody doing this evening? All right, that sounded terrible. How's everybody doing this evening? All right. We're going to talk a lot tonight about law-abiding gun owners. And I'm going to take a guess that if you're with us this evening, that you either are or are thinking about becoming a law-abiding gun owner. How many of us here carry a firearm on a regular basis as is? How many of us carry regularly? All right, handful. How about firearms in the home for self-protection? Firearms in the home. And is there anybody with us who does not own a firearm but is thinking about potentially getting one? Any of us here with us this evening? Looks like we're all gun owners. We're going to talk a lot about law-abiding gun owners. I'm going to take the educated guess that if you came on out here that you're a law-abiding gun owner, because I'm going to take the guess that you didn't come all the way out here on a weeknight just to sit here and listen to me talk about all these laws for 2 hours, just so you could go out and do the exact opposite and ignore everything that we talked about, right? That wouldn't make any sense. So I take the educated guess that if you've made the effort to be here this evening, that you want to learn the law, you want to understand the law, and really most importantly, you want to follow the law. So we'll talk a lot about law-abiding gun owners. Now, a little bit about myself for those of you who don't know me. My name's Mike Giarrita, and from the minute I wake up until the minute I go to sleep, I fight to protect law-abiding gun owners. My entire law firm is focused on the practice of firearms laws in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and at the federal level. I wrote a book about Pennsylvania's gun laws. I hosted a weekly radio program on Fox News Radio for about 6 years where we discussed Second Amendment issues, and I've frequently appeared on Newsmax television to discuss Second Amendment issues. And often when people hear about what I do for a living, they ask whether I grew up around firearms. As a matter of fact, I was in Philadelphia not too long ago working on a gun case, and a lot of the prosecutors in Philadelphia, they'll know me for what I do. They know me as the gun guy. And one of the prosecutors was curious about how I got into gun law, so she pulled me over to the side. She said, Mike, I always wondered about how you got into gun law. Were you raised on a farm? Well, as you could probably tell by the way I talk, I did not grow up on a farm. I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. And although I represent law-abiding gun owners for a living, I always tell folks that being raised in Brooklyn, I had no idea what a law-abiding gun owner was. There was no such thing as a law-abiding gun owner in Brooklyn. Because of the ridiculous laws out there, only two types of folks owned firearms, and that was the NYPD, the police, and unfortunately, who else? The criminals, better believe it. So no concept of the law-abiding gun owner growing up. Now fast forward a few years, I was offered a scholarship to play college baseball out in Oklahoma. And let me tell you something, when I got out to Oklahoma, I very quickly realized that we were not in Brooklyn anymore. Whole different ballgame out in Oklahoma, heavy presence of civilian firearm ownership, a lot of law-abiding gun owners out there, comes a way of life out in Oklahoma. I ended up spending around 6 years out there between my playing career and attending the University of Tulsa College of Law, and that's where I developed what I call my healthy addiction to firearms. First thing I did was I went out and I joined the Tulsa Indoor Firearms Range. I became a member of their training academy, and I spent just about every Friday and Saturday evening for several years training over there. I also happened to make it out to the world's largest gun show, which takes place in Tulsa, Oklahoma every single year for those of us who didn't know. And I always tell folks, the minute I picked up my Springfield XD, it was love at first sight. Do we have any other Springfield folks with us here this evening? All right, so you know exactly what I'm talking about, you know. And I'm not too worried because everybody else here will see the light someday. Isn't that right, gentlemen? Of course they will. I also got my license to carry out in Oklahoma, and in Oklahoma they do things a little bit differently than we do then here in Pennsylvania. In order to get licensed out in Oklahoma, I had to attend an 8-hour course. I had to take 2 written exams, one on gun law, one on gun safety. Then I had to go out on the range and perform a shooting qualification. Then I had to get photographed. Then I had to go down to the sheriff's department to get fingerprinted, submit all my information, and after a 90-day background investigation, I got my license. Now, how many of us here have a license to carry firearms in Pennsylvania? Show of hands. Beautiful to see, almost all of us. Anybody get your license for the first time fairly recently, let's say within the last 5 years? Anybody get your license for the first time within the last 5 years? You, ma'am, what county?
Not the first time.
Not the first time?
No.
You in the back, first time? What county? What'd you have to do? Nice and loud so everybody can hear. Okay. Let me ask this. Anybody leave the same day with your license in hand? Anybody leave the same day? Love to see it. That's the experience I had when I first moved to Pennsylvania. When I first moved to Pennsylvania, I lived in the Harrisburg area, and I was at the Dauphin County Courthouse a few days after I moved, working on a case, completely unrelated matter. The judge was being cranky, as they sometimes are, so he sends everybody to lunch. Judge goes, everybody out of my courtroom. Everybody go to lunch. I don't want to see anybody back in my courtroom for another hour. So I figured it's perfect timing at that point. I could just walk downstairs to the sheriff's office. So I walked on down, started to fill out my application. And the deputy sitting there asked me, she said, well, how long do you plan on being in the courthouse today? And of course I started to complain. I told the judge to send everybody to lunch. I got an hour to kill right now. She cut me off and said, I'll have you out of here in 15 minutes. So I filled out my application and handed it on over. She ran my pitch check, which is our background check here in Pennsylvania. Everything cleared, so I got my picture taken, and I left that same day with my license in hand. Now, legally speaking, they've got up to how long to either approve or deny that license? Does anybody know? 45 days. Up to 45 days to either approve or deny that license. Philadelphia, for many years, was notorious for taking 45 business days. And I'm sure we're all very surprised that they were taking longer to do things in Philadelphia, right? Everybody here is completely shocked. But either way, the process is a lot different than it was in Oklahoma, which surprises quite a few people. A lot of folks figure with us having Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, it would be the exact opposite. A lot of people think Oklahoma is the Wild West where anything goes. But I like to remind folks of the process we've got here in Pennsylvania. Now, when I was finished with my legal education, the bottom line is it wasn't an option for me to move back to Brooklyn. I got used to owning firearms, and I got used to carrying everywhere I could legally carry to protect myself and to protect my loved ones. And I wasn't willing to give all that up just by crossing some imaginary line and moving back to Brooklyn. For those of us unfamiliar with how restricted their laws were out there, moving back to be closer to my family would literally mean having to hand over my guns. And I wasn't going to do that. So I did what any rational human being would do in that situation. Is that right? Not knowing a single soul in Pennsylvania, decided to move to Pennsylvania, begin my legal practice out here specifically so I could continue to exercise my own Second Amendment rights. Obviously, this is something I care very much about, so I decided that this is where I wanted to focus my practice of law. I was very fortunate early on in my career to represent U.S. Law Shield in their lawsuit against the city of Harrisburg for their illegal gun ordinances. And from there, I've devoted my entire career, every second of every day, to fighting to protect law-abiding gun owners and fighting to preserve our Second Amendment, because I think we all understand that it is severely under attack today. Thank you. Now, I think it's great that everybody made it on out here this evening. I know everybody's got busy schedules this time of year. I myself spend a ton of time in court during the week. I was in court for a case in Berks County this morning at 9:30 a.m. and had to drive home to Chester County and back out to see my favorite people here this evening. But I do love it when I get the chance to be at these types of events. I really do. And I love coming out to these events for a few reasons, really. First of all, I happen to like talking about guns. How many of us like talking about guns? I should see everybody's hand right now. Come on, who does? As a matter of fact, if you don't, get out, all right? I also love talking about the law. Definitely a passion of mine. But most importantly, I love getting the chance to be around other law-abiding gun owners like yourselves. I think it's safe to say we're generally like-minded people, and we're definitely now more than ever a very close-knit community. So I want to thank every single one of you for being here this evening, and especially want to thank Berks County Patriots for having us. Now, before we dive into the law, I do have one more quick but very important question for everybody who's with us this evening. How many of us in this room, God forbid it came down to it, God forbid, would be willing to use a firearm to defend your own life or perhaps the life of a loved one? How many of us would be willing to do that, God forbid it came down to it? Any of us not sure? Is there anybody here who's not sure? Looks like we're all sure. I think that shows a whole lot about each and every one of you. I think first it shows that you take some level of initiative and responsibility when it comes to your safety and the safety of your loved ones. And I think that we could all agree that things like initiative and responsibility, they're becoming increasingly rare these days, aren't they? And now more than ever, I want to be around other law-abiding gun owners. And if I weren't around, I'd want my family members to be around other law-abiding gun owners, because I think we can all recognize that we do live in a world that's changing, right? This ain't the same world it used to be, is it? How many of us watch the news from time to time? I know we try not to sometimes, right? But we know the kinds of things that are going on out there. So now more than ever, I want to be around other law-abiding gun owners. I want my family members to be around people like yourselves. But I think we could also all take a step back and acknowledge the fact that with being willing to use a firearm comes a tremendous responsibility. And there is no doubt about that. There's a tremendous responsibility that comes with being willing to pull that trigger to protect yourself or to protect a loved one. And if we're going to take on that responsibility, one of the most important things we need to understand is when Pennsylvania law justifies the use of deadly force. And the reason is just about every time we pull that trigger, it is going to be considered deadly force in the eyes of the law. People misunderstand this all the time, but deadly force does not necessarily have to kill somebody. Does not have to kill somebody to be considered deadly force. It's much broader than that. Because the way the law defines deadly force is any type of force that's readily capable of causing death or serious bodily injury. And I want everybody to think about that for a second. Readily capable of causing death or serious bodily injury. So there does not have to be a dead body involved. And it might even sound strange to some of us, but taking a .22 and firing at an attacker's legs can be considered deadly force just the same and no differently than the 45 point-blank center mass. Or hitting someone over the head with a baseball bat. Or stabbing them with a knife. Or running them over with a car, right? All readily capable of causing death or serious bodily injury. So if we're going to be willing to pull that trigger to protect ourselves or our loved ones, God forbid it came down to it, we need to have a solid understanding and a firm handle on when deadly force is justified. Now, I've used that word, justified, quite a few times so far. So what I want to do next is I want to talk a little bit about what a justification is and how your justification will function in the legal process. Typically, when we hear about a defensive gun use, a defensive shooting, whether it's on television, some other form of social media, we hear about these situations and we tend to associate them in our head with that term self-defense, don't we? Hear about a defensive shooting, we think of that term self-defense. Offhand, does anybody here have any idea how many defensive gun uses we see in this country every year?
Oh, yeah.
He said thousands. Thousands. That's crazy, right? Think about that. Thousands of defensive gun uses every year. What if I told you there were 60,000 every year? Would that sound like a lot? Guess what? I lied. CDC put out a study a few years back, and they used between 500,000 and 3 million defensive gun uses every year in this country. How many of us knew that number? I asked everybody. You didn't raise your hand, sir. That's cheating. That's cheating. I did ask everybody. Between 500,000 and 3 million. Independent study, a guy named Dr. Clark done approximately 2,000 defensive gun uses a day. Different study, 2,000 a day. Think about that. And if we want to be completely fair and objective, because I think it's good to do that, one of the biggest critics of these studies, an anti-gun organization, put out a study saying, no, those numbers are far too high. That's too many. They said it's really more like only 60,000 every year. You're like that, right? Only 60,000. Because to that I say, that's still 59,999 more than we heard about on the news. Isn't that true? Yeah. Let me ask you that. As law-abiding gun owners, does that upset anybody that we don't hear about this stuff on the news? Because this happens every single day in this country. Many of them in our own backyard. And nobody hears about it. Yet you better believe that some maniac walks into a room and shoots up the joint. Everybody in this entire country is going to hear about that. What makes me so upset about it is I don't want anybody to ever make the mistake of thinking that the good guy with the gun or the good gal with the gun is just a myth. I don't want people thinking that this stuff never happens. Because if you listen to what the mainstream media tells you, if we only paid attention to that, we think there's no such thing as the law-abiding gun owner, the good guy with the gun. We think that doesn't exist. But this stuff happens every single day in our country. It absolutely does. I don't want anybody to ever make that mistake. And it does upset me that we don't see or hear about it more often. But when we do hear about these situations, we tend to associate them in our head naturally with the term self-defense. There's a little bit of a problem with that because you wouldn't walk into a Pennsylvania court and raise self-defense. That's not how it works. I defy anybody in this room to look in the Pennsylvania Crimes Code and find me the term self-defense. You're not going to find it because it isn't there. The way you'd raise self-defense in a Pennsylvania court, the principle we perceive as self-defense, is through raising your justification. And what your justification is it's really just your legal excuse. And I want everybody here to remember that this evening. Your justification is, say it with me, your legal excuse. One more time, your legal excuse. Because what we're saying when we raise our justification is we're saying, yes, I've done something that's generally a crime. But the law recognizes this reason why I did it. So we're saying, yeah, I did something that's usually a crime, and I did it on purpose. But there is a legally recognized reason why. And it's very important for us to understand how your justification functions as our legal excuse. And I think it's shown well through the Theodore Wafer case out in Michigan. Theodore Wafer was a guy who lived out in Michigan. One night he was sleeping on his recliner in his living room. Middle of the night, 2 or 3 in the morning, he wakes up to this loud, constant pounding at his front door. And to put this into perspective, he was pounding at his front door so loud that his neighbors even testified that it woke them up, got them out of bed, caused them concern. So this is pretty seriously loud pounding that's causing his neighbors concern, isn't it? So what happens next week? He wakes up out of his dead sleep. He grabs his Mossberg from the closet. He heads on over to his front door. He opens the front door and fires around through the screen door. Does anybody know who was on the other side of that screen door? It's a young lady who had apparently had car trouble about a mile away. Young lady, apparently she had car trouble about a mile away. Now, to be fair, nobody's exactly sure what she was doing there. Nobody's sure why she picked his place of all places, why she was pounding so loud, so furiously. Nobody knows. I don't think we'll ever know. But if anything seemed clear, it seemed pretty clear that this was not the threat that Wafer was anticipating when he got to that front door. Seems pretty clear this is not the threat he was expecting. We're talking about a young lady who was unarmed. Now, when Wafer pulled that trigger, fired that round through the screen door, it instantly kills her. She's dead on his front steps. And realizing what had just happened, realizing that this wasn't the threat he expected it to be, Wafer started to absolutely freak out. He started to freak out. When the law enforcement officers showed up, the first thing Wafer said to them was, "It was an accident, it was a mistake, I didn't mean to do it." Told them it was an accident, it was a mistake, I didn't mean to do it. Now, we're not going to talk about Michigan law tonight. So we're not going to get into whether this was justified or what the Castle Doctrine protections are over in Michigan. And we're certainly not going to get into the tactical errors this guy made along the way. But knowing what we already know about your justification being your legal excuse, what do we think he did? The second he said it was an accident, it was a mistake, I didn't mean to do it. What do we think he did? He flushed any justification he may have had straight down the drain. Flushed any justification he might have had straight down the drain. How come? Because it was an accident, it was a mistake, I didn't mean to do it, can't go very well with, yes, I did something that's generally a crime, and I did it on purpose. But there was a legally recognized reason why I did it. Does that make sense? How those two can't go together very well? Of course. Now later on at trial, Wafer did try to raise a justification. Did try to bring up a justification in court. He was ultimately convicted and he's serving a minimum of 17 years. Now, if you ask me, one of the bad parts about this case is I don't believe what Wafer said was an accurate description of what happened. I don't believe that to be an accurate description. And the reason is I am not convinced that the act of him pulling that trigger was an accident or a mistake, or that he didn't mean to do it at the time. I'm sure looking back on this whole situation, knowing what he knows now, knowing that it wasn't the threat he expected it to be, I'm sure he considers the entire ordeal an accident or a mistake. I'm sure he wishes the whole thing never happened, but I'm not convinced that the act of him pulling that trigger in that moment was an accident or a mistake, or that he didn't mean to do it at the time. So why in the world would Wafer say something that, number one, flushed any justification he may have had straight down the drain, and number two, probably wasn't even an accurate description of what just happened? Why in the world would somebody say something like that? Think about the situation he was in. He had just been involved in what we call a critical incident. And when you're involved in a critical incident, your body undergoes a tremendous amount of physiological effects, and that is like no experience in life. One of my good friends, Corporal Todd Hoover, served over 2 decades with Pennsylvania State Police. He's a federal law enforcement instructor down at Fletzy in Georgia. He was involved in 3 critical incidents, 3 shootouts, while he was on the job with Pennsylvania State Police. And from what he tells me, the physiological effects he experienced after critical incident number 3 were not much better than the physiological effects he experienced after critical incident number 1. Are any of us here familiar with some of the physiological effects that we see after a critical incident? First thing that happens, we get hit with that chemical dump they always talk about, right? That adrenaline hits us like a ton of bricks. Several things happen as a result of that. What happens to our heart rate? Through the roof. What happens to our blood pressure? Through the roof. We've had folks on the scene swear to us that they hit rushing waters, their blood pressure. What happens to your vision? You immediately get tunnel vision, and you immediately become farsighted. If you read a book called Grossman on Combat, anybody ever read that book? Excellent book if you want to learn more about this stuff. Grossman on Combat. He talks about a loss of depth perception, which is why some people say it looks blurry. You lose the use of your fine motor skills. He talks about time dilation, auditory exclusion. You'll have racing thoughts and the inability to recall details about what just happened to you. Think about that. You can't remember the details about what just happened to you. Any of us here ever been in a car wreck before? Quite a few of us. Do any of us remember? Maybe it was the following day, or even the day after that, having some tiny details coming back to us that we didn't remember the second we got out of the car and were freaking out. It's entirely typical. And that's just a tiny taste of what a true critical incident is all about. We had one guy who immediately vomited right after his critical incident. Lost it on the spot. So taking all this into account, all these physiological effects, I think it's safe to say that right after a critical incident is not the time to be making an effort to give an accurate, coherent statement to law enforcement officers. It's not the time. And it's definitely not the time to be making an effort to protect your own rights. And that's where we're going to go over some advice right now. And folks, if we leave here tonight remembering nothing else about what we talk about, I need every single one of us in this room to remember what we're about to say. If we're involved in a critical incident, we're going to do two things. Lawyer up and shut up. Can everybody say that with me one time, because I promise it's that important. Ready? Lawyer up and shut up. One more time. Lawyer up and shut up. How many of us here believe in our Constitution? Give me an amen. Amen. All right, I've come to the right place. We've got a constitutional right to silence and a constitutional right to an attorney, and I strongly recommend that you use each one of those to your advantage. I don't think our founding fathers stood in a huddle somewhere saying, hey guys, what can we put in this Constitution thing that allows all the guilty people to vote for it? They believed in our right to silence and our right to counsel. Now, every so often, I'll get a guy in the back who'll raise his hand and go, Mike, if I lawyer up and shut up, I'm just going to look like I'm guilty. I'm going to look like I got something to hide. Let me ask, don't be shy about this. Does anybody here sort of instinctively feel that way? Like you might look like you're guilty or look like you got something to hide? Any of us? You man? Now, I didn't pay you to be here and say this or anything like that, right? You're going to test the fact, you're not a plan. So I need you to do me a favor. If I happen to be wrong, I'm going to take a guess about you. If I'm wrong, correct me in front of everybody. Just embarrass me in front of all these people. You could do that, right? I'm going to take a guess that you don't have too much overwhelming negative exposure to law enforcement officers. And all I mean by that is I'm going to take a guess that you don't make a habit out of having handcuffs slapped on you and being tossed in the back of a police car. Would that be correct? Oh, thank God. You know, I never know the answer when they ask that question. I was going to a seminar in Monroe County one evening. I asked this lovely little lady in the front row the same question. You're not used to having handcuffs slapped on you being tossed in the back of a police car. She started her answer by saying, well, occasionally I get the wrong person. People, for some reason, think that our constitutional rights are only for criminals, or they're only for people who are guilty. I'll tell you this. Early on in my career, I had to represent a lot of hardened criminals, career criminals, getting appointed on death penalty cases. You want to know something about career criminals? 10 times out of 10, these guys know to lawyer up and shut up. Why do you think that is? As they say in Oklahoma, it ain't their first rodeo, right? These guys have been there, done that, got the t-shirt on the way out. So sometimes it's perfectly natural for us law-abiding citizens who don't have that repeated exposure to instinctively feel that way. That can be perfectly natural, but we gotta get away from it because it's a bunch of nonsense. Our constitutional rights are not just for criminals. They are not just for people who are guilty. Our constitutional rights are for law-abiding citizens like you and I just as much as they are for anybody else. So we need to use them. Because you know who I've seen end up looking like they're guilty throughout my career? It's the people who make that statement under the stress of the circumstances. When their body's undergoing all these physiological effects. They end up flushing any justification they may have straight down the drain and giving an inaccurate description of what just happened. Think about it. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. You just went through the most stressful situation of your entire life. They bring you down to the station. You haven't eaten. You haven't slept. Maybe you had nothing to drink. They ask you questions for 40 minutes in a row. Suppose they let you go. The next day, after those physiological effects wear off, you start to remember some details. Some of them start to come back to you. So what are you going to do? You go back, you amend your statement? Okay. You went back, you amended your statement. A couple of weeks later, you start to remember some additional details. What do? Go back and you amend your statement again. Okay, you're going to get to tell that story a fourth time. You know when that is? In the court of law. In front of a judge and 12 people who are going to decide whether or not you ever get to see the light of day for the rest of your life. And the prosecutor is going to get to ask you some questions in court. You say, on the night of the incident, you made statement number 1. Isn't that true? Yes. And then a couple of days later, you came back and you amended that statement. You added to it, right? Yes. And then you came back a few days, a couple of weeks later, and you made another statement. Isn't that true? Yes. And now you sit here today, in front of the judge, in front of the jury, under oath, telling us story number 4. So tell me something. Were you lying when you told us story number 1? Were you lying when you told us story number 2? Were you lying when you told us story number 3? Or are you lying to us right now? Those are the people who end up looking like they're guilty. Now, some people will get the wrong impression about this. I bet people say, Mike, you're saying this because you're anti-cop. I've given these seminars alongside active and retired law enforcement officers. I've even given this seminar to active law enforcement officers, telling them the same thing. I had a gentleman pull me to the side in the middle of a seminar one evening. He said, Mike, I'm an active law enforcement officer. I've been on the job for 30 years. The best thing you told these people in this room tonight was to lawyer up and shut up, because that's what I've been telling my own children since they were old enough to listen. And I want to let you know a little secret. When a trooper is involved in a critical incident of their own, they get 72 hours before they have to make a statement. How many of us do this? They get 72 hours, they also have to get 2 consecutive nights' sleep. So through this very policy, if nothing else, the police are recognizing for their own well-being that right after a critical incident is not the time to be making an effort to give an accurate, coherent statement. It is not the time. So all I'm saying is if it's good for them, then it's good for us. Am I right? So if we're involved in a critical incident, we're going to do those 2 things. What are they? Lawyer up and shut up. Doesn't sound like I put anybody to sleep yet so far. That's good news. And if I did, I think they got coffee in the back. So that's great, right? Could help that out. So now that we talked a little bit about that, I want to talk a little bit about when deadly force is justified. When is deadly force justified? You know, let's do this. I want you to put yourself in a scenario. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. There's a dead body on your kitchen floor. It's a horrifying scene. Anybody ever see what that looks like in real life? Horrifying scene. Now, if you've got a dead body on your kitchen floor and deadly force was not justified, what is that known as? Murder. What do they call that here? You get murder generally, murder in the 1st degree, 2nd degree, 3rd degree, voluntary manslaughter, involuntary manslaughter perhaps. Anybody know the penalty for murder in the 1st degree? We see these cases get charged as murder generally in many situations. That's murder 1, 2, 3. 2 doesn't usually apply. What's the penalty for murder in the 1st degree? life or death, right? Death penalty in certain circumstances, or what they call LWOP, life without parole. Is that pretty serious? Now, I know there's somebody in this room in their head saying, you watch too much Law and Order, that's why they're thinking this way. But there's somebody in this room saying, oh, my first degree, that is premeditation. That requires premeditation. Was anybody thinking that? Anybody know what the case law says about premeditation in Pennsylvania? It can be formulated in an instant. So from the time your firearm leaves the holster to the time you pull the trigger, you can formulate premeditation according to the case law. Then you got third degree. What's the penalty for third degree? Max penalty on that. Anybody know? 20 to 40. Is that life for a lot of people? Yeah. Serious stuff. Get into manslaughter and things of that nature, but let's call it murder for the purpose of discussion. See, that's how they charge us in many cases. So in order for it to not be murder, you would have had to act in a manner that was justified, right? And you would have had to make that decision in how long? A couple of seconds, maybe a split second? Now, when I asked you earlier, everybody in this room said that you have made that decision that you'd be willing to pull that trigger to protect yourself or a loved one, right? We've all made that decision. With that being said, knowing the consequences, how many of us would feel comfortable and confident as you sit here this evening, standing up in front of everybody and telling me the justified use of deadly force standard in Pennsylvania, word for word, and if you get it wrong, you're going to jail for the rest of your life? How many of us would feel comfortable and confident doing that right now? But a couple of takers over the years, every one of them would have ended up in jail. Does that scare anybody? Does it scare anybody? It should. I'm not saying you should be ashamed. I'll tell you what, I had a sitting judge show up to one of my seminars. I asked that question, he didn't stand up. Somebody during the break approached and said, Your Honor, I thought for sure you would have been able to stand up and tell everybody. He said, hold on a second. There's a reason why I'm here. This is one of the most complicated areas of the law, and I just want to be able to protect myself and my family just like anybody else. So you shouldn't be ashamed or embarrassed that you don't know, but it should scare you, because healthy fear is a good thing. I want you to think about that. Healthy fear is a good thing. It is what keeps us alive. If anybody ever looks you in the face and tells you, I'm not afraid of anything, that's just code for them telling you I'm stupid. That's what they're telling you. Because it reminds me of that documentary Grizzly Man. Anybody ever see that one? Guy's out in the woods and he's taping himself hugging the bears and kissing the bears and talking about how much he loves them and they love him. And he's not scared of them at all. He's not afraid of these bears at all. Now, I hate to spoil the ending for anybody if you haven't seen it. But I think that anybody with the intelligence that God gave geese could predict how this documentary ends, right? It ends with the authorities fishing this guy's watch out of the bear's butt because they ate him. And that guy wasn't afraid at all. He had no fear. But guess what? A little bit of healthy fear would have kept him alive. And that's why we're going to go over the standard. And I want everybody to know the standard inside and out. Under Pennsylvania law, deadly force is justified when you have a reasonable belief that deadly force is immediately necessary to prevent death, serious bodily injury, kidnapping, or intercourse compelled by force or threat. For the purposes of conversation, we're going to call that last one rape. And when you're talking serious bodily injury, the law defines this as severe, prolonged physical impairment. They talk about the protracted loss of the use of a limb or an organ. So we're talking about things that are pretty severe. We're talking about things like paralysis, things like mangling, things like crippling, things like blindness. It's got to be pretty severe. So we've got to have a reasonable belief that deadly force is immediately necessary to prevent death, serious bodily injury, kidnapping, or rape. I want to try something out this evening. I want to make sure everybody leaves here remembering this standard for the rest of your life. So I need you to repeat after me. Can we do that? Sure. Death. Death. You do better than that. Death. Death. Serious bodily injury. Serious bodily injury. Kidnapping. Kidnapping. Rape. Rape. Now I hope that's the first time you shouted those 4 words out loud with a group of people. I'm just saying. Because if not, I got some serious questions about where the heck you've been hanging out lately, right? But death, serious bodily injury, kidnapping, or rape, there are two key components to the overall deadly force standard that I want to dissect a little bit. Let's talk about how they're evaluated and how they come into play. First, we said deadly force must be immediately necessary to prevent death, serious bodily injury, kidnapping, or rape. So we've got to be faced with a threat that's not only necessary in a broad sense, we've got to be faced with a threat that's immediately necessary. We got to be faced with a threat that's imminent. They sometimes call this the imminence requirement. Now, does anybody in this room have another good word for imminent? Because I'll tell you what, I don't usually walk down the street with my pals tossing the word imminent around. Anybody got another good word for imminent?
Right now.
Right now, love it. What else? Immediate, love it. Urgent. I tell you what, we were at the Hilton over in Allentown some years back. We had a packed house, 70-something people jammed into that conference room, standing room only. This one guy showed up. He didn't even live in Pennsylvania. The guy lived in Georgia. But he was staying in the hotel on business that evening and didn't have any plans, so he came on down to our gun law seminar. Sounds like our kind of guy, right? So I asked these folks if they got another good word for imminent. And people are throwing out words like immediate, instant, now. But this southern gentleman from Georgia sitting in that front row, he stands up in front of everybody and he explains to me that something is imminent when it's fixing to happen. I told him we didn't use that one in Brooklyn very often, right? But I like fixing to happen. I like to say something's imminent when it's about to happen. And typically, there are three components we'll see when deadly force becomes immediately necessary. First is somebody's demonstrating the intent to deliver the harm. Intent can be very important. We always hear that phrase, guns don't kill people. People kill people. Intent is the difference between a tool and an instrument of destruction, right? Got to demonstrate the intent. Second, we see that we got to demonstrate the ability to carry out that threat. Doesn't matter if they're not able to do it. Somebody stood up and they said that they were going to shoot lightning bolts out of their fingers. They might have the intent to deliver deadly force. They got no ability. And the final component we typically need to see is that they're demonstrating the opportunity to carry out that threat, right? They got to have the opportunity. So, for example, suppose you get a guy who's 150 feet away and he's got a sledgehammer, right? He's got the means. He's shouting verbal threats at you from 150 feet away. Can deadly force be immediately necessary? What do we think? What does he not have? No opportunity to carry out that threat at that point in time, right? Let's take it to a different level. Suppose, brand new scenario, you get a guy who's much closer. He's in the first few rows among us. He's got a sledgehammer, but he's not doing or saying anything. Is deadly force immediately necessary? What is he not demonstrating? Intent. Now, that is not to say that if we got some guy in the room with a sledgehammer and we don't know who he is or why he's there, that we throw our situational awareness out the window. Not saying that. Just because deadly force isn't immediately necessary doesn't mean we do nothing. It might be a situation where we want to prepare an exit strategy, right? Because I'll tell you one thing I've learned over the years, the best gunfight is the one that doesn't happen. Is that right? Not yet immediately necessary. Suppose you got two guys there face to face. This comes from the case I dealt with. Two guys are face to face. One guy's got a hammer in his hand. It's well within striking distance. And that hammer comes back. Is deadly force immediately necessary? What do you think? I want us to think in our mind of that moment when that hammer comes back. But you also must understand that this system and our laws are flawed at their core. We talked about the imminence requirement, got to be immediately necessary. The second key component I want to discuss is whether you have a reasonable belief. The law says you must have a reasonable belief that deadly force is immediately necessary to prevent one of those four things. Let's say we're neck deep in the criminal justice system. We're downtown, we're at a trial. When that trial's over, who's going to be responsible for making the determination as to whether the defendant had a reasonable belief that deadly force was immediately necessary? Who's going to make that call? I've heard judge and jury, technically both answers are correct. The true technical answer is the trier of fact. Usually the trier of fact will be a jury. Sometimes the trier of fact is a judge, and it's known as a bench trial or a non-jury trial. In Philadelphia, we call it a waiver trial, a little more rare. We'll call the jury for the purposes of this conversation. A lot of times, when we're dealing with the laws of deadly force, people really want clear-cut, black and white answers. They want to give me specific scenarios, and they want very specific answers. It's not the way the law generally works. How many of us think it would be a good thing if we had clear-cut, black and white answers? I'm not so sure, because you know what that would look like? Here's what that would look like. That would look like me walking in this evening with a garbage bag filled with these phone book looking things. And for any of our younger guests, phone books are these things they had a really long time ago. Big books with yellow pages. Right, remember those? But I'd walk in with these phone book looking things and I'd pass them out. You'd open it up and say, if this happens, you're justified. If this happens, you're not justified. If he's this far away, you're not justified. But if he's this far away, you are justified. If the hammer's this size, then you're justified. I don't know that I'm interested or able to memorize 7 trillion different specific facts and circumstances, right? We're dealing with an infinite number of facts and circumstances. And the trier of fact to making that determination. When we're thinking about someone having a reasonable belief in the imminence requirement, one of my colleagues out of Western Pennsylvania, who's worked some of the most high-profile death penalty cases the last couple of decades in Pennsylvania, always says that the justified use of deadly force and that imminence requirement is like a pendulum. What does he mean by that? A lot of the cases we see where deadly force is not justified, the person is too early or too late. It's not yet immediately necessary, or it's no longer immediately necessary. No longer immediately necessary looks like what? Somebody is no longer posing that immediate threat.
They've already got you.
We had a case one time where dad walks out to his son's head being stomped into the ground, gets down their arm, and the people stomping the kid's head into the ground put their hands up and they start to back away. Dad fires. You got to sit there and explain to him that 3 seconds ago you would have been justified, but now you're a murderer. There's a big difference between protection and revenge. A life sentence worth of difference. So that's where we end up too late. Don't we end up? Some situations it's not yet immediately necessary. Too soon, right? If you're relying on the trier of fact to make that determination, do you see how it would be possible for the people making these decisions to have different pendulums? Have different points on the pendulum where they believe deadly force is immediately necessary? And you got to do what you got to do to make your case. A lot of times we have to introduce expert witnesses, for example, to educate the jury. A lot of times jurors think that it's possible for people to do things to get out of situations that just aren't possible. We see a lot of crazy stuff in movies. Anybody familiar with the Tuller principle? What's the Tuller principle? Average male can cover 21 feet and stab somebody before they can draw their firearm and pull the trigger. How many of us are aware of that? 21 feet. You show the average juror that somebody shot somebody with a knife from 15 feet away. What do you think that juror thinks? That's way too far away. He didn't have to shoot him. So we bring in expert witnesses and educate the jury, but understand that there are no clear-cut, black and white answers in these situations because there's an infinite number of facts and circumstances. An infinite number of trial facts. How many of us would believe me if I told you you could take one set of facts, put them in front of a jury in one county, you might end up with one answer? Take that same set of facts, put them in front of a jury in a different county, you might very well end up with a different answer. Would you believe me if I told you that? deal with that stuff all the time. You think we might get some different answers in Philadelphia than we would, say, Perry County, Pennsylvania? Absolutely. So we don't have these clear-cut black and white answers because they don't exist, but what we can do and what we're doing right now is we talk about what the law is, how the law is applied, and I want to talk next about how it applied in a specific case. So when we're talking about whether somebody had a reasonable belief, the jury is tasked with determining whether an imaginary reasonable person under those same or similar circumstances would have that belief. They're looking at whether a reasonable person would have that belief in that situation. Think about it, it makes no difference whether a maniac would have that belief in that situation. How many of us have heard the phrase, I was in fear of my life? How many of us have heard this before? After everything we've discussed this evening, how many of us still think that if you're in fear of your life, you can choose somebody? How many of us think that? Hopefully nobody, right? Because the fear has nothing to do with it. You could be Ted Bundy, sitting there with a gun to your head, not have an ounce of fear because you're a psychopath. Could you still be justified? Could you still have a reasonable belief that deadly force is immediately necessary to prevent death or serious bodily injury? Absolutely. On the other hand, I know people who are deathly afraid of clowns. Clown walks in the room, they're in fear of their life. Does that mean they'd be justified in using deadly force? Absolutely not. In all seriousness, though, how many of us have watched a defensive shooting on television at one point or another? And the person who had to pull the trigger said that they were in fear of their life, but when you watch it back, something doesn't quite seem right to you. How many of us have had that experience? I'm sure many of us have. Michael Drake case in Florida is one of them, for me. Where it's obviously not an immediate danger, it was an imminent threat at the time that he pulled that trigger. And he said he was in fear of his life. I don't doubt that. I don't doubt that he was in fear of his life. But that's not what it takes. His belief was unreasonable. And the way the jury will arrive at that conclusion is they have to evaluate the totality of the circumstances. The totality of the circumstances will come into play. Fancy way of saying just about everything is going to come into play. So instead of standing up here and trying to explain the totality of the circumstances, I'm going to tell you about a case that we had years ago. Years ago, with this client who lived in Lebanon, Pennsylvania. Guy was 80-something years of age. He's a veteran of the Korean War. And he had been born and raised in Lebanon. Now, where he lived in Lebanon had grown somewhat crime-ridden over the years. I'm not sure if you folks are familiar with this little pocket of Lebanon. They had some pretty serious crime problems. But Korean War veteran, God bless the guy, he was the type of guy, he said, damn it, this is my neighborhood. I've lived here my entire life. So if I can't live here, I can't live anywhere. So he was there to stay, God bless the guy. I think we all know somebody who has that same attitude as Korean War veteran. So like I said, he was older. He had also had some health problems over the years. He had had 3 hip surgeries. And part of the reason he didn't want to move is he had no family whatsoever. When I say no family, no wife, no kids, no siblings, nobody. All he had in his life was this tiny little dog that he had adopted. And Korean War veteran absolutely lived for this little dog, loved his life. And every single night, like clockwork, Korean War veteran would go out for a walk on the streets of Lebanon with his little dog. One night, it's late at night, they're going through their routine, they're out for their walk. Out of nowhere, Korean War veteran hears this crashing noise in the garbage cans next to him. He looks over, he doesn't see anything, so they continue with their walk. A few seconds later, here's another crashing noise. This time he feels something hit him in the back of the leg. He looks down, and there's a brick on the ground right next to his foot. He turns around, and there's a group of 9 guys coming towards him. 9 guys. They're all young. They're all in good shape. They look like they got some pretty serious intentions. They're yelling curse words at him while they're coming towards him. And the guy in the middle of this group, he's got a brick in his hand. So they had just thrown those first 2 bricks at him. They get pretty close to Korean War veteran. They get about here to here, the guy in the middle with that brick in his hand. He gets to this position right here. Now let's press pause. Let's freeze that moment in time. Tell me something. Did our client, Korean War veteran, have a reasonable belief that deadly force was immediately necessary to prevent death or serious bodily injury? What do we think? Oh, we get that instant, resounding, unanimous yes. But how would a jury ultimately arrive at that conclusion? They'd have to evaluate the totality of the circumstances, right? So what specific factors in this situation would contribute as to whether Korean War veteran had that reasonable belief? What factors will come into play? They've already thrown 2 bricks at him, and the second one hit him. They're demonstrating what? Intent. They're saying, yeah, we want to hurt you, and yeah, we're going to do something about it, right? Is there a third brick in this story, sir? Where is it? It's in his hand. Where do we think it's going next? And his head. I had a guy raise his hand one night. He goes, oh, well, Mike, we don't know what that guy was going to do with that third brick. He goes, we don't know. And I said to him, sir, technically you're not wrong. Because we don't know what that guy was going to do with that third brick, the same way we don't know that they all weren't about to get struck by lightning, right? Okay. We don't know, but that's not what's important. What's important is what a reasonable person in that situation would think was about to happen with that brick, right? You never know what's going to happen until when. It's already happened, and it's a little late at that point. I now know that he was going to shoot me because he shot me. Yeah, it's a little late at that point, right? What other factors will come into play? 9 of them, and there's one of him. Is that a disparity if I've ever seen one?
And their
Why?
proximity.
Why? Why do we know? Physical proximity, the fact that they're this close with that brick as opposed to 40 yards away. Excellent. How about this? He's had 3 hip surgeries. They're all in good shape. He's 80-something years of age, and they're all younger. I used to say he's 80-something and they're all young, and then this lovely lady came over to me after a seminar one night. She said, Mike, I really loved your seminar. It was wonderful, but I got to let you know, 80's really not that old anymore. So now I just say younger. I hope that's fair enough for everybody. What are they saying? Well, they're coming towards him. They're yelling curse words at him. Would you say they're approaching him in an aggressive manner? Would a reasonable person perceive it that way? I got to bring up one last thing, because somebody always thinks of this, even if they're not saying it out loud. I was like, Mike, he's got to protect that little dog. He's got to protect that little dog. Now, full disclosure, I myself had a tiny little dog that I adopted from Texas while I was in law school. She passed away a year ago. I put a picture every day, still a background on my phone. I finish every show on Fox News Radio saying, we miss you, Ellie, Daddy loves you. It's the absolute love of my life. But as much as I love my little dog, I gotta let everybody know that under Pennsylvania law, dogs are considered what? Property. Deadly force would not be justified to protect property under these circumstances. But being the dog lover that I am, I've come up with a potential backdoor argument to at least get this in. Do you want to hear it? Yes. So let's say they're coming on over, they're getting ready to do something to this little dog. They're getting ready to stomp on it or kick it or even throw something. Would a reasonable person in that situation at least consider, as a part of the totality of the circumstances, hey, if they're about to do something so violent, so aggressive to this little dog, how am I not to believe that I'm absolutely next? Would a reasonable person take that into consideration?
Yes.
I'll tell you what, I've told this story to tens of thousands of people all over the country over the last decade. I've only ever had one guy tell me, no, absolutely not. One guy. And my only conclusion is that that guy was just a cat person. Isn't that right? He just didn't like dogs. Didn't like dogs. Explanations all around. Let's see what happened with the rest of the story. Guy in the middle's got that brick in his hand. He's in that power position. He's about to deliver. And what does Korean War veteran do, sir? Draws his 1911 on him. Draws his 1911 on him like all punks do. They all turn around, they take off in the opposite direction. So now Korean War veterans' number one priority is to get to safety as quickly as he possibly can. I hope we all understand that it's a horrible, horrible, horrible idea for him to start firing off rounds at these punks while they're running away. Right? No longer immediately necessary. Difference between protection and revenge, a life sentence worth of difference. So he holsters his 1911, he picks up his little dog, he walks home as fast as he possibly can. He gets home, he puts his dog down in the little bed, and not a few seconds later, there's a bang at that front door. Police, open up! They open the door. They shove it open and they slap cuffs on him. Somebody take a stab at what they were doing.
Responding to the call.
The punks called the cops on him, right? And we all know what that phone call sounded like, right? We were minding our own business. We weren't bothering anybody, and this crazy old man shows up, and he's got a gun, and he shoves this gun in our face, and he threatens to effing kill us. Now tell me something, folks. What should Korean War veteran do in this situation? Lawyer up and shut up. That's absolutely right, and that's exactly what he did. And by doing that, he put us in the position to defend him. Because he didn't try to tell the police the things that he thought they wanted to hear under the stress of the circumstances. He didn't try to talk his way out of this. I tell people all the time, I've been doing this a lot of years. I have never once seen anybody talk their way out of anything. I've seen a whole lot of people talk their way into some trouble. Never seen anybody talk their way out of anything. So he lawyered up and shut up, and ultimately we were able to make our case to law enforcement officers and the prosecutors that under the totality of the circumstances, he was justified. Remember we spoke about how your justification functions as your legal excuse, right? Yes, I did something that's generally a crime, but the law recognizes a reason why. Now let's try to apply it to this particular situation. Is it generally a crime to walk down the street and point the gun at somebody? Yes, you can't. Who said no? It's not generally a crime. Thank God you showed up at the seminar. I was hoping you wouldn't have to show up to a seminar to at least know that much. That it's generally a crime to walk down the street and point the gun at somebody. Okay, just to be clear for everybody who wasn't sure. For everybody who wasn't sure, just to be clear, it is generally crime to walk down the street and point a gun at somebody. You can't just do that. And Korean War veteran did it. He's not denying it. He did something that's generally a crime, and he did it on purpose. But there was a legally recognized reason why he did it in that situation. Does that make sense, everybody? So I tell the story for a few reasons. Number one, it shows how the totality of the circumstances come into play. Excellent answers all around. It shows how, in this situation, justification functions as your legal excuse. And finally, it shows why it could be important to lawyer up and shut up in these situations. Now, before I turn this over, I want to just leave you with one more thing. Under Pennsylvania law, generally speaking, we have a duty to retreat if we can do it with complete safety. We generally have a duty to retreat if we can do it with complete safety. When I come back up, we might field a couple of questions. I think it's more important that we talk a little bit about the Castle Doctrine, Stand Your Ground, and how they impact the duty to retreat in that situation. But as a base for that next segment, I need every single one of us to remember that generally speaking, we have a duty to retreat if we can do it how?
Safely.
One more time.
Safely.
All right, let's give a hand up. Chuck, all right.
What do you guys think so far?
It's wonderful.
Good. So what we're going to do, we're going to show a real quick video. I normally don't do this in seminars, but we have a video of a member story. Somebody who used U.S. Law Shield was a member of ours, and it's probably total, it's 2 videos, but together they're only about 7-8 minutes. And then Lynn's going to come up, and we'll get Mike back up here as soon as the break's over.
If you're like most Americans, you're concerned about crime in this country. If you were, you wouldn't be here today. Every day we're inundated with stories about road rage, robberies at ATMs and convenience stores, home invasions, and other incidents that can leave us fearing for our safety. While law enforcement is always looking for ways to make our streets safer, it's important that we also take proactive measures to strengthen our own safety and self-defense abilities. That's why you're here. While it's easy to live our lives thinking that would never happen to me, the reality for many is much different. Your commitment to protecting yourself may one day save your life, just as it did for David Edmondson.
My name is David Edmondson. I'm the founder and sauerkraut maker at Salt and Savor Sauerkraut in Dunsmuir, California. I used to hunt when I was in my teens, went with my stepdad and my stepbrother, and loved it. Most everybody I knew had a rifle or two, and it was just part of life. I kind of got interested in it again, and so I bought a pistol, and I think that was around 2010. You know, it's not like we live in a crime-ridden area, but, you know, can't hurt to have a little extra protection around. I'd been through the CCW training and was told you need to have some legal protection in case you use your weapon, and at the time I was traveling to Sacramento on a weekly basis. So going to the city, I thought, you know, I better get that insurance. I landed on U.S. Law Shield. They had no cap on the defense, no monetary cap on what they would spend. I thought, well, that's what I'm doing. Glad I did. One of my weekly trips to Sacramento started out like a normal Friday for me. No big deal. The only thing that was a little bit unusual was that I wasn't able to make my last delivery Friday night. I got down there too late, so I was going to have to make that Saturday morning before the farmer's market, and it's downtown Sacramento. So I was just going to sleep in my van close to the store, so I could buzz over there in the morning and get on over to the farmer's market. I stayed in the van there before. Nobody bothered me, and I got there fairly early, and I was tired. It was like 9 o'clock, and 2 o'clock in the morning, somebody came and knocking with a big gun. He had a 2x4 that looked like it had been broken from a pallet that had nails in it, and he was wailing on the van. The first one was on the hood, and it was a pretty loud thump, and it woke me up, and I had my pistol right beside me, and I was shaking. I remember trying to call 911, and the guy kept going around the van. He was yelling something about me watching it, or laughing, or starting. I don't know what he was thinking. At one point, he had hit the side of the van and actually punctured through the metal with a nail head. So I was lucky one of those didn't end up in my skull. At that point, I knew next time he leans in, it's time to pull the trigger. And he did, and I did, and it was instant silence. It was a huge relief. Like, oh, thank God. The very next thought in my head was, I'm going to jail.
David thought this would never happen to him, but unfortunately, none of us can predict when tragedy may strike. We'll follow up a little later in this class and learn the outcome of this incident. Your participation in
Thank you. I'm Lynn Greer. I'm the membership sales rep for this
U.S.
event.
Law Shield member.
I'm going to give you a quick lowdown of our program so you understand what it is. We are a membership program similar to AAA. So if your car breaks down, you call AAA. If you find yourself in a self-defense situation, whether it's with a weapon or anything, so any type of self-defense, you would have a membership card. This emergency number on the back of your card goes to Mike's cell phone. Okay, it doesn't go to a call center or anything like that. If it doesn't go to Mike's cell phone, it goes to one of his partners. People who specialize in gun law and specialize in self-defense, okay? We also have a non-emergency number. This goes to the call center. So this is if you have legal questions and you just want some advice. Then the attorney will call you back when they're able to. Sorry, my phone keeps cutting out. All right, our membership plans, there's different levels. So all you would ever pay is a monthly fee, okay? So you don't have any retainers to pay. If you ever need Mike's services, you don't have to put down thousands of dollars for a retainer. As David said, there's no caps, there's no limits. Mike was telling me about a case that went up to $1 million just recently, okay? And U.S. Law Shield covered everything. Okay, hopefully this works better. Okay, great. So tonight, if you are interested in signing up, we do have some QR codes that will take you to the registration process. Chuck and I can help you out with that. We can answer any questions that you have. All of the plans, you can pay by the month or the year. You can switch your plans and you can cancel anytime. Okay, so we're very flexible to suit your needs, and if something changes in your life, you can also add a spouse for $19.95 to any of the plans. Okay. I will tell you about the top tier plan. The benefit to that is a $1 million civil liability insurance policy. So even though we're not an insurance company, we do offer an insurance product in the top tier plan. Okay, so if there's a civil judgment against you, that will cover you up to $1 million. All of our plans cover criminal and civil defense. Okay, so again, you would not pay any extra attorney's fees for anything that you're going to have to deal with, which we call the fight after the fight. All right. Tonight, if you sign up, the QR codes will get you 30 days for free, so you don't pay anything for 30 days, and then also waive your activation fee. Or you can choose an IFAC kit, and this will be drop shipped to your house. Okay, so this is a gunshot wound kit. It's one per household. All right, so you can kind of choose between the 30 days or the IFAC kit. All right, so we're going to play the next part of the video. All right.
U.S. Law Shield member David Edmondson protected himself from a violent attack that could have easily ended in tragedy. He is one of many members who credits our independent program attorneys and U.S. Law Shield with making the aftermath of their self-defense shooting incidents easier to navigate. Here's the conclusion of his story.
Bought the pistol with the hope that I never used it, other than target practice. I was just defending myself. We all have that right? You think you do. But the police that show up don't know what you were doing, right? As far as they're concerned, you're the bad guy. It was the suspect. You've just been violently attacked by somebody completely at random. And now you're the suspect? If you're in an incident where you use your firearm, you call 911. The next call is to U.S. Law Shield. Consider this was Saturday, holiday weekend, 4th of July, 2:15 a.m. I'm going to call and get somebody on the line. A guy answered the phone. Oh, thank God. I told him what happened. Doug was in Colorado. I was in California, so we talked on the phone, and he went in the other room and talked to the detective, and then the detective brought the phone back and said, you know, we're free to talk to your attorney again. So we talked, and then he told me that they're prepared to release you, but they need a statement from you. Like he said, say, telling your story. On speakerphone with you, he said, if I hear anything or you feel uncomfortable, you can stop the interview, you can ask me a question. So it was like having him right there. It was great. He said, they're ready to release you, and then I started shaking. I can't believe I'm going to get to go home. In my case, the evidence was pretty clear. I think I would have been released, but I'd hate to think would have happened or could have happened if I didn't have an attorney. What are you going to do if you didn't have that? You're going to start asking the police for a phone book? You got to go through the yellow pages and look for an attorney at 2:15. It's rather terrifying. We've done everything you could to avoid that situation, and then you're the target of possible prosecution. Scary stuff. If you defend yourself and you think that's the end of the problem, that's probably the start of a whole new part of the problem. Doug was just so reassuring. I'm so grateful for U.S. Law Shield. I can't imagine what would have happened without that, but I'm never not going to be a member.
All right, at this time, folks, we're going to take 5 minutes, little break, stretch your legs, get something to eat, something to drink, buy a gun raffle ticket. And then the attorney's going to be back up, Mike's going to be back up to finish up, and then he's going to be doing some Q&A. So please do not leave.
Oh my gosh.
Buy some tickets, 50/50s, whatever.
Jerry, I do have
and
the
make sure you go
QR
back if you have
code.
any questions in the meantime.
Hang on,
to
let
the
me
table back there with Chuck.
Let's see if I can pull
and,
it up for you.
Ask them any questions and to sign up.
Looks like you have a lot of phones with you.
I do.
iPhones?
No.
No.
Androids.
Oh.
Yeah.
I was hoping you could airdrop some pictures.
Oh, I'll be putting them on my nonprofit's website as we after tonight. Like I'll start putting them up.
What website?
So it's SoupMamaOfficial, and that's my nonprofit. You can type it into Google, and it'll come up everywhere.
Was it Sue what?
Here, hang on, honey. Let me do this. I'll make it easy for you. That
Oh,
week.
Soup Mama.
Yeah.
So what do you do?
So I got my nickname cooking for the trucks in DC protesting the medical mandates. Hang on one second. I just want to. There you go, Jerry. There's that QR code. Sorry. So anyway, I got my nickname cooking for the trucks in DC protesting the medical mandates. And then when all of those guys went home, my friends and I, we took all of our stuff, turned it into a nonprofit. Now I go all over the place, and I support grassroots groups all over the United States, up in Canada, been down to the Texas border, and try and get people involved.
Interesting.
So, yeah, I'm local, though. I live right here in Berks County. So.
With us.
What was that?
Where?
I'm live streaming right now, so I prefer not to say.
Pottstown, Reading, Huddersfield, what I'm saying.
Just over the hill. I'm literally within half an hour.
Okay,
How's
cool. Yeah, I'm in Douglasville, so...
Okay.
Interesting. Well, I'm curious to find out more about what you do.
Yeah. Well, we've done a lot of different things. Like I said, I've streamed a lot of the election stuff last year, of course, because Pennsylvania, a huge battleground state, and we wanted, we needed all the voters out that we could get.
Absolutely.
So I did cover a lot with the elections last year. I did go down to the Texas border. So I don't know if you heard about the convoy that went down to stand with the Texas border guards.
I
2 years
may have,
ago?
but I don't recall.
Well, I live streamed from New York all the way down to the Texas border. That's where I adopted my puppy dog. But we helped do relief goods for East Palestine, Ohio. We helped do relief for North Carolina, Texas.
Okay.
So places where the governments kind of fail everybody and the people are still hurting.
Yeah.
We'll try and step in and help them out and give them a little bit of a hand until they can get the help that they need.
So where's most of your support come from financially?
Me, myself, and I. Most of it, yeah. So I don't generally push for just random donations.
Right.
If I am asking for donations, it's usually for a specific cause, kind of like East Palestine or North Carolina, because the people that have followed me since the beginning. I mean, I started this just by happenstance, right? Like I went down just to say, to help and see what I could do to further the cause for medical freedom, right? And the question, how can I help, has got me into all kinds of interesting places. But I am self-funded, right? So, and I want people to understand, I'm not in this to make money. I love my country. I want my children to have a future. I want my grandchildren to have a future. I want them to have freedom. I want them to have their rights and be able to make their own decisions about what they want to do with their lives and be able to have that. And if I'm out there going, I need you to help fund me for this, it gets to be too much, right? And to me, that's not what it's about.
So you don't file a 990 then?
We have a nonprofit. So everything, I'm not the treasurer. I don't do any of the financials.
Okay.
I'll be honest,
Hey folks,
I don't
hot
want
dogs
to.
left.
Right?
We're trying to
I like
move
keep
them out.
it separate.
We're
Because
going
I
to give
want
them away
people to
for $2.
understand full
$2
full
for a
transparency.
doggy.
So when
When
we
you
raised
grab a
money
dog,
for East Palestine, for
take a couple
example,
home,
we kept
give that
everybody
to the
updated
dog
on
when
our
you get
totals,
home.
and we took
Or,
the
take
camera
it
with
home
us
to the dog.
shopping. So people could
And,
see where their money went,
about 3 minutes,
what it
we're
went
gonna get
for.
started
They
back
actually
up.
came with to
So,
the distribution, so they
if
could
you
see
would,
it go
please help us
directly
out,
to
get
the
rid of those hot
residents.
dogs.
Same thing in
$2
North Carolina. We
for
took
you guys, we'll
the
give you
goods that we took
2 for
down, we
$4.
took directly to the nonprofits and other groups working right with the residents.
How many work with you?
So we have 4 board members right now, but we have volunteers from all over the world. So right now, our moderators, we have people from New Zealand, Canada, and the United States.
I'm intrigued to find out more about you.
Yeah, monitoring all our stuff. So it's very exciting. I mean, I love it because we have a lot of great relationships that we've forged over the last few years. And what's even cooler is, in some ways, right? I get information then from other countries, so things that we don't see in the news about what's going on in other locations that you wouldn't see without a VPN, which I have one, but I don't always have the time because I'm on the road a lot.
So what's on your docket for the coming year?
Well, so right now I am working with some scientists on a project for East Palestine. There is a gentleman that might have a solution for some of the dioxins and things, the chemicals. Now, I don't know if you know, that was 500 feet from our state line here in Pennsylvania. So folks in Pennsylvania, including a gentleman from Darlington, like after the train derailment, he ended up with getting a double mastectomy, right? Because of this weird, very rare type of cancer that he ended up getting after all those dioxins from the burn.
A man got a vasectomy.
No, double mastectomy.
I thought you said vasectomy.
Yes, he ended up with a rare form of cancer, which, of course, they don't want to attribute to the chemicals, but he was fine prior to the derailment and the chemical burn. And him and his wife, they're lovely people. They're from Darlington, which is Pennsylvania here, right, like I said, right on our state line. And I have a picture. It was so sad. I have a picture. He actually lifted his shirt, and you can see the scar from here to here, where they had to cut. It's awful.
Ever heard of a guy getting a mastectomy?
Well, it's because of all the dioxins and things, all those chemicals that were released. One of the things that was released was phosgene gas. That was created in that chemical burn. Well, that's a crime against humanity, and if you know anything about that, that causes neurological disorders, that can cause all kinds of other intestinal problems. You know what I mean? It's really not good for your body. It's a lot like radiation sickness. And a lot of these toxins that were created because of the acrobutylate, I guess it was dumped and then they burned it, it created a whole mess of stuff. And these are forever chemicals that don't really go anywhere, and they accumulate, they're bioaccumulate, which means they stay in the body and they keep stacking up, so they make you sicker and sicker and sicker. The EPA had the trains running literally, like Norfolk Southern had the trains running days after the incident without properly cleaning up that soil, without properly, removing all of that water, so that those chemicals actually polluted some streams, Leslie one and oh my gosh, I can't think of the name of the other one, but they both feed into the Ohio River. So not only have those toxins gone through like this radius around East Dallas, the smoke plume touched, I think it's something like 19 states and in Canada, where they could see that toxic plume, and all of those dioxins are polluting the Ohio River watershed. Meanwhile, my girlfriend has the deepest well in the area. Without a filter on the faucet, if she turns it on, it fizzes like soda, and it smells like a mixture of sulfur and battery acid, and the EPA says that's safe for her and her babies.
Is this on your website?
Well, a lot of the trips to East Palestine and things, yes, that's all on our social media.
All right, folks, if you're ready, let's get started back up, get our seats.
Absolutely.
And like I said, there'll be 2 minutes. All right, 2 minutes yet, Chuck, all right? 2 minutes, folks, 2 minute warning.
Another cup of coffee quick. Okay, guys. I'm gonna zoom. I'm gonna try and straighten you out a little here. I realize you're a little crooked, and I do apologize. And I'm gonna kind of do this. I'm gonna run to the ladies' room, guys. So I will be back and set the camera if they start talking.
How are you doing, Chuck? We good to start up again? One more minute? Okay.
Kirk Evans.
The U.S. Marshal.
know, we're going to start back up. So Michael coming back up front. Are we done with the videos, Chuck? No more. We're done. Okay, thank you.
All right, guys. Okay, I do believe they are getting ready to start in just a minute or two. So we've had our short break. I managed to get a bottle of water because, again, this is a really, really great seminar. I hope you guys are enjoying this so far. Again, second half about to start momentarily with our speakers again. But what a great night here. Berks County Patriots hosting this wonderful, wonderful event here.
Mr. Mike, come on up.
So, flip this around. We're getting started for part 2, guys. Make sure you share this out with your friends. Valuable information tonight.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. Hold your applause, You're far too kind. It's embarrassing. All right, when I left, we were talking about the duty to retreat. We said that generally speaking, we have a duty to retreat if we can do it how?
Safely.
Safely, and the law even says with complete safety, but there are certain circumstances where the law will eliminate that duty to retreat altogether. So in certain situations, legally speaking, there will be no duty to retreat, even if you can do it with complete safety. First, I want to talk a little bit about how the duty to retreat is impacted under Pennsylvania's Castle Doctrine. So under the Castle Doctrine, there is no duty to retreat inside your home. Generally speaking, no duty to retreat inside your home, even if you can do it with complete safety. Another area that impacts the duty to retreat is a law that is known as stand your ground. Now, I'm sure that everybody here has heard of stand your ground at one point or another. The problem is everything we've heard about it from the news is wrong. Because if you listen to these people on the news, they make it sound like stand your ground is this broad law that brings us back to the Old West and blood's going to run through the streets because of stand your ground. That's not only nonsense, but it's dangerous because stand your ground is incredibly narrow. It only offers a tiny bit of protection and really only applies under certain very specific circumstances. So I want to debunk the myth right here, right now, and talk a little bit about stand your ground. Under stand your ground, there will be no duty to retreat, even if you can do it with complete safety, if certain criteria are met. One of the first requirement that we're going to talk about, you can't be engaged in unlawful activity. You can't be engaged in criminal activity. Part of this is you can't be in unlawful possession of a firearm, as a result of that, if you are currently engaged in illegal activity, stand your ground will not apply. You know, that's a very big disappointment for a whole lot of us, right? Shouldn't be too difficult. You've got to be a place where you're legally entitled to be, as part of that requirement as well. Another requirement is that you must be in the position where you have a reasonable belief that deadly force is immediately necessary to prevent death, serious bodily injury, kidnapping, or rape. Does that standard sound familiar? It's the justified use of deadly force standard. So that's one of the requirements that must be met in order to stand your ground to apply. The final requirement is the attacker must be using or wielding what is or appears to be a deadly weapon. So in other words, no deadly weapon equals no stand your ground. No deadly weapon means no stand your ground. Now, I don't want us to get confused. I am not saying that deadly force can never be justified unless your attacker has a deadly weapon. Not saying that at all. I think we all understand that you could certainly have a reasonable belief that deadly force is immediately necessary to prevent death, serious bodily injury, kidnapping, or rape, even if your attacker does not have a deadly weapon. I think we all get that. But what I am saying is if he's got no deadly weapon, we don't get stand your ground, and therefore we may still have the duty to retreat if we can do it with complete safety. Some people get very mad at me about this deadly weapon requirement. I got to remind people sometimes that I did not write this law, I just get to tell you what it says. But sometimes I'm not quite sure why people get so mad about it. I had a lady standing up one night. She said, "Mike, you're ridiculous and you don't know what you're talking about." She said, "Mike, you mean to tell me that if I got this huge guy on top of me, giving me the beating of my life, that he's got no deadly weapon, and therefore I don't get stand your ground. I said, ma'am, by the letter of the law, no, he's got no deadly weapon, and therefore, no, you don't get stand your ground. She said, Mike, that just shows how little you know. Because everybody knows that fists are deadly weapons. She said, everybody knows that. So I said, ma'am, what was the name of the book that you wrote about Pennsylvania gun law again? No, I'm just kidding, I didn't say that. I said, ma'am, respectfully, I don't believe the lawmakers intended for fists to satisfy this particular requirement. I said, I don't believe they meant for fists to meet the requirement, because if they meant for fists to satisfy the requirement, why would they bother making it a requirement? How many of us here this evening have fists? Do me a favor and raise your hand. Would that be pointless if fists satisfied the requirement? But here's the follow-up question I asked. I said, how in the world do you think stand your ground could even help you in that situation? The answer is it couldn't. It wouldn't. Let's explain why. We already said that all stand your ground can ever do is if the requirements are met. The law will eliminate the duty to retreat. But we also happen to know that that duty to retreat only ever applies if we can do it how?
Safely.
Safely, and the law even says with complete safety. So if you're in that situation where you're taking the beating of your life, can you retreat with complete safety? No. Not a chance. So we wouldn't need stand your ground to get rid of the duty to retreat in this situation. We wouldn't need it because the duty to retreat wouldn't apply in the first place. Are we all on the same page? That's stand your ground. One last thing I want to talk about. We talked about using deadly force to protect your own life. I want to briefly talk about using deadly force to defend somebody else's life. Now, first of all, just a matter of practice, I think we all need to understand that in many situations, tactically speaking, the best thing you can do is to be a good witness, right? And a lot of these situations, getting involved is unwarranted and gets people in more trouble than it's worth. But ultimately, there's a reason why we do carry to protect ourselves and to protect our loved ones. So I want to talk a little bit about defending a third party and what the law says in Pennsylvania. Under Pennsylvania law, deadly force to protect a third party will be justified if three criteria are met. Number one is that if you were in the shoes of the person you're protecting, that you would be justified in using deadly force. So if you were in the shoes of the person you're protecting, you'd be justified in using deadly force. Requirement number two is that the person you're protecting themselves would be justified in using deadly force. And a lot of times the same facts will cover multiple requirements. How could you have the first one but not meet the second one? Or vice versa? What is the type of situation where not both of them apply? Well, let's say I am a 95-year-old woman. And let's say I walk into the store and there's a 70-year-old man who's punching the clerk of the store in the head. Now, if I were in that situation as a 95-year-old woman, I'd be looking at a reason to believe him in that serious bodily injury, quite potentially, right? But the clerk of the store is none other than Mike Tyson in his prime. Can I use deadly force to protect Mike Tyson in his prime under those circumstances? Well, if I were in that situation, I'd be justified, but the person themselves would not be justified. Understood? Third requirement is that it must appear that intervention is immediately necessary to prevent the harm. So in other words, it's got to look like if you don't intervene, if you don't get involved, that this harm is going to happen. So let's go through a scenario, because I get people asking about the gas station example all the time, right? What about in the gas station? Let's talk about our friend Legal Larry. It's Tuesday at 2 a.m. and Legal Larry is in the Wawa. He's looking around for beef jerky. And in through the Wawa door walks Chris the criminal. Chris the criminal walks up to Wally the worker. He pulls a gun out and puts it to Wally's head. And he says, Wally, put the cash in the bag or you're going to die. Wally says, I don't want any trouble. And Chris says, maybe you didn't hear me, so now you're going to die. And he puts that gun right up to Wally the worker's head. Now Larry's in the corner looking for his beef jerky. Does Larry have any legal obligation to get involved?
No.
No legal obligation to get involved. For all the law cares, he can keep looking for beef jerky, he can crawl away to safety, he's going to have to look himself in the mirror every time he shaves for the rest of his life knowing that he didn't intervene. But the law doesn't require him to do so. I'll tell you this, we talked about minding your own business and being a good witness in many situations. But if there were a good guy with a gun standing 15 feet away in that kind of a situation that were my loved one behind the counter, I'd hope they'd do something about it. That's just me. Would the law protect Larry? Would he be justified if he did use deadly force in this situation? What do we think?
Yes.
Let's go through the requirements. Number one, if Larry were in Wally's shoes, would he be justified in using deadly force? Reasonable belief, deadly force immediately necessary to prevent death or serious bodily injury. Guy's got a gun in his face. Number two, would Wally himself be justified? Same reasons, right? Same reasons. And three, does it appear that intervention is immediately necessary to prevent the harm? If a jury finds that all three of those requirements are met, then Larry would be justified in using deadly force to protect Wally. Now, one other thing that you have to keep in mind is that these are all evaluated under the facts and circumstances as you reasonably believe them to be, and that you have no more of a duty to retreat than the person you protected. So people ask, first of all, if Larry's in the aisle and he can get away, does he have a duty to retreat? No, because we're going from that third party's perspective. He's got no more of a duty to retreat than Wally does, and Wally doesn't have the ability to retreat with complete safety. Understood? Another question people ask, Mike, is it a problem if Larry's shooting Chris in the back in this situation? What do we think? No, because we're going from that third party's perspective, right? Now, if Larry was shooting Chris in the back and claiming that he was defending himself, then yes, he has a problem. But we're going from that third party's perspective in this situation. Finally, facts and circumstances as we reasonably believe them to be. The law doesn't require you to be all-knowing, it requires you to be reasonable. What do I mean? Let's say that we find out after the fact that Chris and Wally were in on it together. The plan was for Chris to pretend to hold up the store, Wally would put the cash in the bag, Chris would go away, they'd meet up later and split up the cash. The gun wasn't even real, it was made out of plastic, but it looked real. Would Larry be justified?
Yes.
Facts and circumstances as you reasonably believe them to be. So if his belief was reasonable, then absolutely. If the plastic gun was an orange water gun, then we got problems, right? If the jury finds that the belief was reasonable, absolutely. It can work the other way around. What do I mean? You can have a belief that is good faith, that you hold with all your heart, that is utterly unreasonable. We talked about legal Larry, we talked about Chris the criminal, we talked about Wally the worker. We got one last character for you. His name is Nicky the Knucklehead, okay? Nicky the Knucklehead shows up at the Alice Cooper concert. Anybody familiar with Alice Cooper? Yeah. Great show. If you've ever seen him live, all kinds of crazy stuff going on, right? He's got Frankenstein walking across the stage. He's got these dolls covered in blood, and then he's got this one part of the show that hasn't changed in about 4 decades. These two guys in these hooded medieval costumes get onto the stage, they grab Alice by the wrist, they drag him over to this fake guillotine, and they put him in the fake guillotine, they pretend to decapitate him, and then one of the guys in the hoods picks up this quack's head out of a bucket, he holds it up to the crowd, and everybody goes nuts. It's great. Did I spoil it for you? I'm sorry, I might owe you tickets. I owe you tickets. He's been doing it for 40 years, so I don't think I spoiled it for everybody. So Nicky the Knucklehead shows up at the Alice Cooper concert. He's singing along to his favorite songs. He's enjoying all the theatrics of the show, Frankenstein, the dolls, and this part of the show comes up. These two hooded guys grab Alice by the wrist, they drag him up to the middle of the stage, they roll out the fake guillotine, they put Alice in the fake guillotine, and Nicky the Knucklehead loses his mind. Why? He thinks this is real. I mentioned the fact that he's stupid, right? We talked about that. So Nicky the Knucklehead draws and shoots the two hooded men dead. Now, Nicky really believed that this was happening. He did. Would he be justified? No. Because it's evaluated under the facts and circumstances as you reasonably believe them to be. So you'd have to convince a jury that Nicky's belief was reasonable under the circumstances. I happen to think that's a pretty tough sell. Even though he really believed it because he's an idiot, his belief was not reasonable. I had a wise guy show up to a seminar one night. Probably had about 100 people there. He raised his hand. He goes, well, Mike, I've never seen Alice Cooper live, so I didn't know that he does that. And he said, how many other people in this room have seen Alice Cooper live? A room of 100 people, not a single person raises their hand. So this guy really thinks he's got me, right? He's smiling from ear to ear. He embarrassed me in front of everybody. I said, you know, sir, that's a great point. It's an excellent point that you've never seen Alice Cooper live, and neither has anybody here, and none of you knew that he does that. But how many of us in this room, having never seen Alice Cooper live, would show up to an Alice Cooper concert with all the theatrics of the show talking about Frankenstein and the electric chair and these dolls covered in blood and really believe that these two guys showed up in these good and medieval costumes? They hijacked to the start of the show, they dragged them up to the middle of the stage. Oh, and by the way, just happened to bring their very own guillotine, right? Just happened to bring the guillotine. But they rolled out the guillotine and they're about to execute the star of the show in front of all these thousands of people. Well, not a single security guard moves a muscle. And the entire band continues to play the song and watch it happen. How many of us would really think that that were happening? Nobody raised their hand that night either. And that's why that wise guy who thought that he stumped me, he actually chased me down and he cursed me out in the parking lot afterwards. But that's a different story. Facts and circumstances as you reasonably believe them to be. We talked about it a lot tonight, didn't we, folks? We talked about your justifications, your legal excuse. Yes, I did something that's generally a crime, but the law recognizes the reason why. We talked about the duty to retreat and the exceptions. We just talked about defense of the third party. I'm going to take a couple of minutes to take a few questions. If anybody's got questions, I think there's ultimately a microphone that's floating around out there. And so if you just raise your hand, we got time for just a few. Try to keep them related to gun law. I don't know anything about the mating practices of the seal or rare birds, or I might know a little bit of baseball trivia. Alice Cooper questions? Great guy.
I don't remember that. Okay, I don't know anything about Alice Cooper.
No.
So in that story with the Korean War veteran, he said that he was about to get attacked. He brandished his gun. They ran away. He went home. The police show up. They went on to his curtilage, and then they went into his house and arrested him. Well, how did they get a warrant so fast from a judge in order to do that? Sounds like to me they violated his Fourth Amendment rights, and his mistake was to open the door to the police.
Well, there's certainly something to be said about not opening the door in those situations without warrants. There are exceptions to the warrant requirement. That certainly wasn't the first thing at the top of his priority list at that point, right? When you're dealing with being charged with crimes and things like that, your main concern, for most of my clients at least, is how do we keep me out of jail, right? But that's certainly a good point. In these situations with lawyer up and shut up, I want to add a third one to this that we don't typically talk about at this seminar, but to your point, the third one would be, I don't consent to any searches. Right, we talked about invoking the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, and the Sixth Amendment. What's the Fourth Amendment? Actually, I want to do this. Who's a U.S. Law Shield member in the room? Anybody U.S. Law Shield member? Card carrier? You want to take out your card real quick? Let's see how quick you can do this. I'm gonna help you out by bringing over my microphone. Oh no, he's in trouble if he actually has to protect himself. Okay, he's gonna help you out. We're gonna do a tag team over here. Can you hear me?
All right, read number 4. Okay. Okay. The holder of this card invokes their right pursuant to the 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution. All applicable provisions of the state constitution and all applicable provisions of the state codes and statutes Any questions of this individual must be immediately suspended and shall be continued only to the presence of and with the advice of legal counsel.
Give him a round of applause. So notice you talked about invoking the 4th, the 5th, and the 6th Amendment. What's the 4th Amendment? I thought you folks said you believed in the Constitution earlier. What's the 4th Amendment? Right against unreasonable searches and seizures, right? That's I don't consent to any searches. What's the 5th Amendment? Right against self-incrimination. That's the shut up part, right? What's the 6th Amendment?
Right to a lawyer.
Right to counsel. That's the lawyer up part. So lawyer up, shut up, and I don't consent to any searches. People say, well, why do I consent to searches if I don't have anything on? That's how you protect yourself. I can teach another 2-hour seminar on why we don't consent to any searches. But in situations, they say, what if they're going to look anyway? What if they're going to do something anyway based on an exception to the requirement? Well, by telling them you don't consent, you're protecting your rights as much as possible. Because then if they don't have an exception, you've got a problem, right? I don't know that you're going to stop them in the then and there. That's another issue. A lot of people think that these cases are won on the side of the road. That's not typically the case. But you're affording yourself the most protection possible by saying, I don't consent to any searches. Because once you consent, guess what? All your rights just went out the window.
Yep.
They no longer need that exception to the warrant requirement or need a warrant. Good question.
What about this idea that police are always saying, well, we have probable cause, we smell marijuana?
That's fine. Let them articulate that after the fact when we're arguing in court. It's not your job to argue with them then and there. If you invoke your right by saying you don't consent to any searches, then you're protecting yourself as much as you possibly can. I get people, here's one thing I want to say, just practical stuff that you've learned doing this for a lot of years. I get people who call my office and they'll tell me a 10-minute story. And at the end of that story, they'll say, and they can't do that. You know what my answer to them is?
Yes, they can.
My answer is it sounds a lot like they did, right? I don't think you understand the meaning of the word can't. Maybe they can't legally do something. Maybe they shouldn't have done something. But as far as physically stopping something in the here and now, that's not always the goal, right? It's not always the goal. Protect yourself. Yes, sir.
First of all, thanks for coming, Mike. Very good. Didn't you give a good presentation? Mike, I'm wondering if you could briefly touch on the civil end of things after you come out of jail, and also burner launchers, and that's the less lethal. Have you had any? You have?
No.
Oh, you haven't. Could you touch a little bit on that? Thanks.
Okay, first we'll start with the whole area of less than lethal and everything like that. You've got to be careful because even in terms of things like rubber bullets, we've seen packaging that says, warning, may cause death or serious bodily injury. What did we just talk about in terms of the deadly force standard, right? What is deadly force in Pennsylvania? Any force is readily capable in the manner that's used of causing death or serious bodily injury. So you will have certain products that are marketed as less lethal or less than lethal, whatever it may be, and are still considered deadly force, and you'd have to have the same justification as you would in using a firearm. So you've got to be careful about that. There are a lot of different things that could be used in a manner that makes it deadly force, right? So we've not run into any cases with this in particular at this point with burn. I think there's a lot of development that we're going to see over the next few years as they become more and more popular. Here's what I will tell people about options like that, is it's good to have layers of defense. It's good to have something between shouting curse words and shooting somebody, right? So you may want to consider options that are in between. There are situations that might warrant the use of force, but not the use of deadly force. So that's something that everybody should have, is some kind of layer of defense in between. As far as civil stuff goes, I got a quick story that basically explains a good bit of how civil lawsuits work. There is a hat that U.S. Law Shield made many years ago. And this hat was the ugliest hat I have ever seen in my entire life. Some of you remember us for almost 10 years. You may have seen this hat at one point or another. The CEO of U.S. Law Shield at the time was in town for a seminar, and I was sitting there ragging on this hat. I said to him, listen, man, I hope you fired the guy who designed this hat. This is the ugliest looking hat I've ever seen. I don't know who designed this thing and said, yeah, somebody's going to want to put this thing on their head. And he says to me, well, Mike, when I designed that hat, so I was embarrassed. The guys who were with me, they thought it was pretty funny, so they started wearing this hat everywhere we went. I show up to a Law Shield seminar, they're all wearing the hat. Finally, a guy walks in, it's like a 10th time, it got played out. He's wearing the hat, and I said to him, you know, I'm sick and tired of you wearing that hat. I told you to stop wearing that hat. If you wear that hat one more time, I'm going to sue you for wearing that hat. And they all started laughing, and then they remembered what I do for a living. They're like, hold on a second. Can he actually sue me for wearing a hat? How many of us say that I can sue him for wearing a hat? Raise your hand. How many of us say that I can't sue him for raising a hat? Raise your hand. I can 100% sue him for wearing a hat. Doesn't mean I'm going to win. But what do I need to sue him for wearing that hat? I need paper and a filing fee. I go back to my office. Plaintiff is a resident of Chester County, Pennsylvania. Defendant is a resident of Chester County, Pennsylvania. On or about said date, defendant wore an ugly hat, which is stupid and ridiculous looking, an exhibit. A photo of which hat is attached here to is Exhibit A. I give the court a nice picture of that. Wearing of said hat caused plaintiff pain, suffering, and other intangible damages. Wherefore, plaintiff raised this honorable court grant compensatory damages, money to compensate, punitive damages, money to and any and all relief this court deems just and equitable. So I drive down to Westchester, I got my filing fee, I go to the pathonetary, some of the people recognize me. Can they look at this silly hat lawsuit and say, Mike, silly hat lawsuit, this is ridiculous. I'm crumbling this up and throwing it in the garbage, I'm not filing it. Can they say that? No! They don't have the authority to do that and make a determination on the merits. I got my filing fee, I got my paper, they gotta file a lawsuit. So now I walk across to the sheriff's office, I pay them to serve. Silly hat lawsuit, they knock on the guy's door. Here you go, you've been served with silly hat lawsuit, have a nice day. Walk away. My buddy looks at it, he reads it, he says, this is ridiculous. He crumples it up, he throws it in the garbage. Good idea or bad idea? Bad idea. Because he's only got a specific period in which he can respond to that lawsuit, and if he doesn't, I'm sending him a notice of intent to file a default judgment. And if he doesn't respond in a lot of time, and I've given the proper notice, I go back to the pathonetary and I get what's known as a default judgment. So now I've got a judgment against him the same way as we went to trial on the silly hat lawsuit and I won. So now he's on the hook for damages. I send him the default judgment. He crumples it up, throws it in the garbage. Good idea, bad idea? Bad. And we're going to find his assets. Civil cases are different than criminal cases. Criminal cases, they're going after your freedom. Civil cases, they're going after what? Money. Money. Different standards, too. Criminal case, beyond a reasonable doubt. Pretty high burden. Civil cases, what? Preponderance of the evidence, which means more likely than not, which means 50.0001%, right? More likely than not. We always think of the O.J. Simpson example. Jury did not find him guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, but found more likely than not in the civil case. Bernie gets same thing. Got two different results in a criminal and civil case. Now, in Jersey, they have a specific law in the books that regardless of whether somebody's justified in a criminal context, it can't be applied to a civil case. So they're not precluded from filing a civil case. Pennsylvania, fortunately, has what's known as a civil immunity statute. So if somebody is deemed justified in the criminal context, they have civil immunity. What does that mean? It means if you raise that defense, they can't sue you and win. It doesn't mean that they can't sue you. Understood? So they could still bring suit even if you're deemed justified in the criminal context. But because of the civil immunity statute in Pennsylvania, were you deemed justified, ultimately you have civil protections. They can't sue you and win, but you have to raise that defense in order to take advantage of it We've seen cases where this defense was waived because people working in the defense simply didn't know about it. So that's a little bit about the civil case. I think we have time for 2 more. Or 0 more if nobody's got questions.
I have a question real quick. Well, I'll turn the mic out for people that are trained in martial arts, can they actually be charged with using excessive force or deadly force or whatever? I was told that once.
What I will tell you is that if anybody tells you my fists are registered as deadly weapons, that's BS. That's nonsense. That's not a thing. But what we can look at differently in some of those situations, whether the force used was reasonable under the circumstances, right? They may be more readily capable of causing death or serious bodily injury than the average person. But the same can be said for somebody who's completely untrained and has a physical advantage. So, yeah, everybody's distinct physical characteristics are going to play a role in the type of force that they're using and whether that force is reasonable, whether it's proportional to the threat. And the type of force that you're using could be considered deadly force even if you don't have a deadly weapon. We see grown men strangle people with their bare hands, for example. And that doesn't require any training necessarily. But yes, everybody's individual physical characteristics will come into play when you're determining what type of force they're using, what type of force is reasonable in the circumstances. Yes?
The case about that ex-Marine on the subway in New York, where I don't know if the gentleman was a friend where he was attacking someone, and the Marine just got him down on the ground, chokehold, and the guy died. How would the people defend it? How would the view defend it?
I have to be honest with you. I know the case that you're talking about, the Daniel Penny case, right? The amount that I know about the case is the stuff that I've seen on the news and headlines and everything like that. That's not nearly enough to give intelligent commentary on these types of cases. One thing I will have everybody know is that when we hear talking heads talking about particular cases, 99% of the time they're not nearly qualified to say the things that they're saying. They haven't spent the amount of time that's necessary digging into the facts. They probably don't have all the information that's available through discovery to make these statements and reach these conclusions. So I try not to be that person in this situation. On rare occasion, I'll comment on things like the Kyle Rittenhouse case. When it first came out, they made the court documents public, so I knew exactly how they were charging and how it was written up, and I was able to comment on something like that. But when you're dealing with a full-blown trial and all that evidence, and I know only headlines and very specific statements, I think it would be irresponsible to comment on it. Which a lot of people aren't afraid to do these days, if you notice, right? People are not afraid to give their uninformed opinion these days.
Unless for teams like that. I just want to do one more here. Yeah. I have a question. What happens in the state the corner end illegal with a gun?
I don't think. Can you repeat that one more time?
Okay. How's that? Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, what happens in the state the corner and illegal? Let's say we have a gun in our hands. Okay, would that affect us?
If you're caught with a gun in your hand?
Yeah. Let's say we corner and illegal. I guess if you're caught with an illegal gun.
Oh,
no. Well, I think it was illegal person. You know what I mean, right?
Illegal immigrants being caught with firearms?
Or let's say we corner them and we have the gun in our hands.
Oh, yeah, I would stay out of that. You just call the authorities. You're asking if you could detain somebody at gunpoint? Yeah, I wouldn't do that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's something you want to get involved in.
Okay, that's what we have.
Yeah, no, you don't want to do that. Anybody else? Yes. Yeah, last one.
If somebody breaks into the house as a thief, not necessarily armed or anything like that, can I show my gun and say, get the hell out of here? Or am I getting charged?
There's a difference between what you can legally do and what would be wise, right? There's an old proposition that generally you shouldn't draw your firearm unless you're prepared to use it, right? We've all heard that before. In many cases, that's also the best position, legally speaking. If you took a course like personal protection inside the home, they're not going to teach you to do that. What they're going to teach you to do is create as many barriers between yourself and the threat as humanly possible. And if, God forbid, that person breaches that last barrier, you're not only going to be set up in a good position tactically, you're going to be in a better position legally. Because if somebody's breached multiple barriers, they've entered unlawfully, they breach that final barrier, and you're armed and you're prepared to defend yourself, could you ever have more of a reasonable belief in that situation? That's how you protect yourself. You know, with the McCloskey situation out in Missouri, you remember that, right? One thing I walked away from that is that they did not have a plan. Because if they had a plan, their plan would have been, hey, I'll stand out here, and you go down there with the gun. They didn't have a plan. They were trying to do the fire drill while the house was burning down. And so what everybody should walk away better off from seeing cases like that is we have to have plans in advance, right? We don't want to be doing fire drills while the house is burning down. So I encourage everybody to go to a course like personal protection inside the home, where they'll teach you how to create different strategies in those situations to best protect yourself. And like I said, that tactical advice that they typically give in that situation will put you in the best position legally as well. We talked about a lot tonight, didn't we, folks? Yeah. Talked about your justification, it's your legal excuse. Yes, I did something that's generally fine, but the law recognizes a reason why. We talked about the Catholic doctrine, stand your ground, and how they impact the duty to retreat under limited circumstances. We talked about defense of others. We also talked about when deadly force is justified, right? When it's justified. So let's try this one more time. Repeat after me. Death.
Death.
That was terrible. We can remember that. Death.
Death.
Serious bodily injury.
Serious bodily injury.
Kidnapping.
Kidnapping.
Zucchini. All right. He was paying attention. We also talked about what we're going to do if we're involved in a critical incident. What are we going to do? One more time.
Shut up.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thanks so much for that.
We're going to do a drawing here for the 50-50, and I know there's a girl, her name Carissa. Would you mind doing the drawing?
Oh, you want me to do the drawing?
Sure.
Oh my God.
It's $25. And the winning number is 000.
I got to get my tickets out.
Last three numbers 145. 068 145. $25.
Oh, hey, look, I got it.
No, seriously. She's a winner. That was not planned. Sorry about that. Okay, and don't forget, next 9 days from now, December 18th, we have the Christmas party honoring all our veterans. All our veterans will be here for that. And one second, before we leave, I'd like to say a
I
little
did
prayer.
pick a good one, guys.
For us,
Oh, I picked my own.
Hold on a second. Let's hold on. Okay. Remove your covers, please. Dear Lord, dear Lord, God of heaven, give us this day. We thank you for all the knowledge that we were attained here. Lord, keep us safe on our way home, and we praise your name every day that we live. Amen.
Amen. I was, Jaws. $25, baby. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me move this chair in. Move this out of your way there, guys. What was that? I was surprised you asked me. Like, I bought a bunch of them, so I all in one. But I bought, I bought them on the break real quick. I figured, I was like, oh, you know what, I still had a couple of bucks. And I was like, it's a good call. So, cool. Oh, listen, I am not worried about it.
Can I get you to put your hat on one more time and get your picture?
Sure.
Yeah, picturesque.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. About ready to go here.
Shawl here, so I'm not so disheveled.
Okay, we'll start. Now we're talking. Oh, good, you're posing well. Okay. Oh, yeah, got it. Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, not a problem.
Yeah.
All right. So, hi.
Good to see you again.
Yes, absolutely. Please stay in touch.
Thank you. How do you
Pleasure.
say your name?
Charisse.
Charisse. I like it.
Thank you. Me too. All right, guys. That concludes tonight's special live stream. Again, guys, that was self-defense and the legal system. Absolutely amazing, amazing presentation this evening. Thank you for joining us. I hope you guys found this really educational and entertaining and useful. I hope you guys share this out to all of your friends. This is super, super important knowledge that every U.S. citizen needs to know. Any firearm owner, anyone out there worried about protecting their families, please make sure you send them this presentation. Absolutely valuable, valuable, valuable information, guys. Amazing, amazing folks. And again, let's see here. I don't want to mess this up, so I want to tell you guys this group again, because it is U.S. Law Shield, guys. U.S. Law Shield. Again, amazing, amazing presentation this evening. I will be getting photos up for you guys as soon as I can, including that QR code, in case you guys want to sign up. But again, amazing presentation this evening. Make sure you get in touch with those guys, U.S. Law Shield and Berks County Patriots, the sponsor of tonight's event here. Absolutely amazing. Again, they meet the third Thursday of every month at the Temple Fire Company in Temple, Pennsylvania. Again, guys, those meetings start at 6:30 at night. An amazing, amazing group of grassroots patriots, always working hard to preserve our liberties and freedoms and educate you guys and get you activated. So I hope you enjoyed tonight's presentation. Guys, I am going to be signing off here so I can start heading home. Make sure, if you haven't already, to hit your notification bell, subscribe, and follow our social media channels. We will be on our way to Canada this week. Guys, this weekend, we have the Christmas convoy in Niagara Falls with our friends from Niagara 10-4. So if you haven't already, again, make sure you are liking, sharing, subscribing, and following our channels. Hit that notification bell so you are notified when we go live. Again, we will be on the road this week at the tail end of the week, making our way to Canada for those Christmas celebrations. Again, I hope you all enjoyed this amazing presentation this evening against self-defense and the legal system, hosted by Berks County Patriots and U.S. Law Shield. Thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you all have a wonderful evening. God bless. Take care of each other till I see you again. Have a fantastic evening. Love you guys. See you soon.